Hey there, I'm Chief Meteorologist Jason Smith here in this edition of Next Weather. We're going to take a look at August in general in the tropics, and specifically we're talking about mid to late August because now we're getting into the more active part of the tropical season, and just like clockwork, we are starting to see an uptick in the number of things that we're watching out in the Atlantic basin. So things are starting to happen in the tropics, and we're going to take a deeper dive on that topic here in this edition of Next Weather. All right, so I think you're going to pop it up like this where I'm on one side of the screen and the graphics on the other, and then we'll take it full from time to time. This is a map that takes a look at the climatology of where we normally see systems form in August. And basically the entire Atlantic basin, it's go time now. So for most of the summer, in the quieter months of June, July, and really the first couple of weeks in August, we don't see as much happening coming off the coast of Africa. And it's not real common to see things even happen in the Atlantic unless it's the far western Atlantic. Now we're looking at a bright orange shading where there's a zone there in the western Atlantic and even the eastern Caribbean, which is another area we don't see much happening in June and July. All of a sudden, new areas are more favorable, according to the calendar, for tropical storm formation. So right now, it's getting to be the busier time of the year. And this is a graphic I think that will really illustrate this for you better. And I'm going to bring it up full. You see where we are on this graphic. This is showing us where the most activity is, storm frequency, since 1850 or so. And the first part of August is relatively quiet. And then when we start getting out of the first part of the month, we're still on the low end of the scale. It's definitely an uptick from June, but then you get into the back half of the month and it's like going up the side of a mountain as far as the amount of tropical activity that we can see. So what happens is you get into June and July and the first week or so in August and kind of golden thinking, well, maybe we won't see much out there this year. Or maybe we won't get a storm at all. And then all of a sudden, they're all lined up out there in the Atlantic, as far as at least tropical waves and potential areas of development. And that's what we're starting to see now. So how favorable is the environment for tropical development? Well, there's still some dry, dusty air coming off of Africa, which will limit tropical storm formation. It dampens out some in the Caribbean and the Gulf, and this takes us through Saturday. But if I continue to run this through time, notice how the atmospheric dust over the Atlantic basin begins to wane. We see very little of it. And that would be the case as we head into late next week. And that goes according to plan. Normally, the calendar shows an uptick in tropical activity. So things are getting more moist. The water temperatures are there. We know that the water temperatures are supportive of tropical systems. It's been a long, hot summer here locally and across the Atlantic basin. But the other factors that weigh in are atmospheric moisture and Saharan dust, and then, of course, upper level wind shear. So let's check out the shear graphic next. And what it's showing us is a streak of relatively high wind shear in the central Atlantic. That's going to be where you see that orange spot, kind of looks like the spot on Jupiter almost. And through the end of the week, there's fairly high wind shear in the central Atlantic, but not so much down along the intertropical convergence zone, which is where a lot of things form between the Cape Verde Islands and the Caribbean Islands. Still looks like a good bit of wind shear in the Caribbean. And then as we go through time, still some wind shear in the Caribbean, but less in the Atlantic basin. Now, we are watching a disturbance that should be headed for the Caribbean, and it may actually form and develop, but then run into some of that upper shear, which could limit its ability to hold together. And that's one of the things that's showing up in the models. But overall, things are getting a little more favorable. Now, this year, the predictions, because of El Nino, are a below average season as far as tropical activity, but it doesn't mean we're not going to see anything. So as far as named storms, potentially 9. We've had 2, so we may see 7 more. That's a lot. especially over what most likely is going to happen in the last part of August and into September. We could see 4 hurricanes, that's a lot, and 1 major one, and we all know that it only takes 1 to cause us big problems. So the season forecast is showing that, we have a lower prediction compared to average, but we still could see tropical systems. So the tropical weather outlook, just like you would normally see this time of the year, we get past about the 10th of August, it's like flipping a light switch, and here we go. We've got 3 things we're watching. If you were watching Fox 10 News earlier in the week, there were 2 things we're watching. Now there are 3 things that we're watching. And what we're looking at is 3 X's, and one of them's yellow, one of them's orange, and one of them's red. And they're color-coded. The red one is most likely to form. The orange one is more of a medium chance. The yellow one is a low chance. And the one that we're watching the closest right now is the red X that is tracking towards the Caribbean. Keep in mind, once it gets in the Caribbean, it may have a tougher environment, but the National Hurricane Center's bumped the odds up to 80% on that one. If you're watching this later in the week, it may already be an active tropical system, but we're not going to get overly alarmed if it forms into something tropical, because I promise you, there are going to be plenty of tropical storms and even hurricanes in the open waters of the Atlantic, and a lot of them find a way to turn or dissipate before they ever make it to the Gulf. But occasionally, 1 or 2 sneak through, and that's when we see a big problem. The one that's orange is going away from the United States. It has a short window of opportunity to develop. It may be more of a hybrid subtropical system, not going to be a factor for us. The one that's red, that has a much higher chance of developing. There's a wave behind it that's pretty robust, but it will encounter some hostile atmospheric conditions, and so right now it looks like a low probability wave. So all eyes are on the X that is red. And then if we look at the computer models, I've got the X that is red highlighted, and this is the GFS model. And what the GFS does is it brings this system, even organizes it, but then brings it near the Greater Antilles by early next week, and it shows it as really not a well-defined system. So like it may actually fall apart once it gets into the Caribbean according to the GFS model. The wave that's behind it never really did anything either on this model. We'll check a second model. This is the European model. It forms into what looks like an organized tropical storm. It brings it towards the northern Leeward Islands, and then it too just doesn't show much in the way of a defined system around Jamaica into early next week. If this takes a track through the Caribbean, it's going to be weaker because it will run into wind shear. That's our current thinking. And the intensity models are all in agreement with what we're seeing with these global models, the GFS and the European. They show a pretty weak system. But what all this means is that there's nothing that we have to change our plans for right now. We could have an active tropical system in the Atlantic this week. In fact, there's a good chance late this week we see something. Once it gets in the Caribbean, it'll have tough sledding, and we just got to keep an eye on everything, which we will do throughout the tropical season, because one day you don't see much going on, and then the next day you're going to get a tropical weather outlook that looks like this. And now that we're getting into the more active part of the season, that's really the norm to actually see that. So August is a more active time. The first couple of months of the year of the tropical season are normally pretty quiet. If we see a system, it's not typically a hurricane. It's normally a tropical storm. But once we get into the late August and into September, some of the most powerful storms we've ever seen have happened during this time frame. So we will be closely watching this for you here on Fox 10, on Next Weather, on our streaming platforms, and here throughout the tropical season for you, so that you can be informed on what's happening in the tropics. It's definitely getting to be go time now.